here today. I'll invite each one to take the virtual stage now. Jessica Ravello, CEO and co-founder of Arcadium. Jessica, good to see you. Jill Kenny, co-founder and CEO of Paideia Gaming. Jill, good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Renee Gittins, general manager of Phoenix Labs.
Hello.
Great to have you here. And Leanne Lumbe, head of external games, Netflix. Leanne, great to have you here.
Hi.
And our moderator is none other than Gordon Bellamy, CEO of Gay Gaming Professionals and a visiting scholar at USC Games and USC Esports. Take it away, guys.
Hey, thank you very much, Ned, and thanks LA Games Conference for bringing us together, and of course the sponsors, and of course the people who took time to spend time with us today. I want to begin with a deeper introduction. This is a powerfully curated panel of thought leaders in and around our space. So I was hoping that y'all would introduce yourselves and maybe talk specifically about your roles in your organizations and what your organizations are trying to get done, like sort of the purpose, mission of your orgs at this time. And I'll go alphabetical by first name. So we'll start with Jessica.
Okay, great. Well, and no pressure being the first one, huh? So Jessica Ravello, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Arcadium. We are a creator of classic casual games for what we call the grown-up audience. Our demo is 35 plus, ranging all the way 55 plus, 75 even year olds who are playing our games. We've been in business now for 21 years, which is makes me feel incredibly mature, I will say. And we have a website, arcadium.com, that reaches hundreds of thousands of players, but collectively reach about 1 million players a month. We also have mobile games, then we provide games for third parties like the Washington Post and Microsoft as well. And so our purpose, why we exist, is to create games that grownups love to play. We want to create a community for what we call the grown-up gamer, and we're excited to do that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jessica. Jill, same question.
All right. Yes, I'm Jill Kenny, and I'm the CEO of Paideia Gaming. So Paideia is a woman-led tech gaming and media company. And what we're doing is we're building a community for gamers to connect, learn, and play. So we're doing this all through our online portal, which has tournaments and gameplay, top-level skills, media and content. We create our own content, anything from podcasts to written editorial to video series. And then really the community is at the heart of everything that we do. And to join this community, you do have to take the Paideia Pledge, which aligns very much with our purpose and vision that says, I commit to being supportive, inclusive, and kind within this space. And everyone knows that any sort of sexism, racism, ableism, or other prejudices are just not allowed. So even though we are women-led, we really are open to all gamers that share that vision. I started in May as the CEO. Prior to that, I was at Red Bull. I'm from Canada, up here in Canada, and I led their media and content team. And Red Bull's actually been in the gaming industry for a very long time, so understood the space, but also how lopsided it was in terms of what was being done to reach a more diverse and inclusive audience. We started as women, that was kind of the main one we saw, but since we've been in it, we've realized there's like so much opportunity to really kind of change the game in this space.
That's so cool. Next, Leanne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leanne. I head up the external games organization at Netflix. And so, Netflix has just started to get into video games, and we are looking to build a variety of different games for the diverse amount of members that we have on Netflix. And for me specifically, I'm looking to build a portfolio with external developers. So that could be anything from licensed products, third-party products, and then second-party games that we build with Netflix IP, and looking to create that diversity and that variety inside of the portfolio and add more value to our member subscription by providing them with great games to play. I've been for about 20 years, and prior to this, I was at Riot Games, and I headed up their publishing division, which was Riot Forge. So a lot of my experience has been in development, and then I've moved into more of the publishing business side of game development. And one of my key passions is making sure we build diverse teams. And as a female leader, that's extremely important to me, that we have that representation so that we can build games for diverse players.
And Renee.
Hello. Hi. So yeah, my name is Renee Gittens. I'm the general manager for Phoenix Labs Vancouver. Phoenix Labs is about a 300-person AAA studio who has really been built around the concept of people are the ends, not the means. And you see that in our culture, throughout the studio in terms of how we, treat each other, how, we compensate everyone, and even the diversity of the people who work on our games, as well as our desire to support people across all platforms as well. I also sit as the vice chair of the International Game Developers Association, which is a nonprofit organization that supports and empowers game developers around the world in achieving fulfilling and sustainable careers. So I've been working in the diversity side of supporting the game industry for a very long time, and that's something that I take with me to Phoenix Labs as well.
Wow. So it's so great to hear about the 4 different vectors across which each of you are leading in such a meaningful way. I was especially drawn to your pledge, right? This pledge that people engage with. It reminds me of sort of GDC, this pledge of a code of conduct, of a baseline of how we treat each other. And it's really great to see valuing people sort of, as I like to think of it, like in the batter and not the frosting, right? There's so much policing, which is done like, oh, if you do X, Y, and Z, then we will police you, versus we're innately going to be good to each other and respect each other. It really struck me. So I want to pose that question to all of you, right? Because all of you are going to be touching gamers, audiences in such meaningful ways. But I'll start with you, Jill. How are you bringing that sense of belonging, right, to underrepresented people in your games, in your marketing, like that pledge, and in the services as they're experienced by the public? Like, how are you, what does that through look like for you, Jill? And I'll ask that same question of all of you. What does that through look like from discovery into experience, into identity as player in your worlds?
Yeah, so for us, because we are a startup, I think we have the privilege of starting something net new, which is great, versus trying to kind of reverse off something and make it diverse and inclusive. So the first step when I started was to make sure that the first individuals that were brought to the team not only understood the gaming industry, but also came from diverse backgrounds. So they could keep myself and our mission and our vision accountable across everything that we do. We still are a relatively small team. We have 4 full-time members, 10 contractors, but whether it's from their gender, their background, or the titles that they play, they're really able to bring that diverse respect. And we've had, one of our creators, her bio is Black, bi, and ready to cry, and she's very big about body positivity. And when we are creating, so we don't create video games, we are game agnostic, we play all games, but we have the platform in order for gamers to play whatever games they love on our platform. But all the assets and art that you see that we put out there are created by us. And if someone that works closely on the team says, hey, this doesn't represent me, I do not see myself in this, that's really important, I think, to change. And we have had a couple of our own characters that we've created where, it was a bigger woman who, we put on long pants and covered her. And the team was like, let's put short shorts. Like, why not? And I think that it's really exciting to see and empowering for everybody, because everybody needs to see themselves in the mainstream media, and they need to show up that way. So it's been really exciting that way. And I really look to my team to help guide how they want us to show up so it's representative.
That's awesome. And I love that, once again, that's speaking to belonging versus being accommodated, right?
Yeah.
Like, we've all been included or afforded as opposed to being in your short shorts, as it were. Leanne, so same question. You're working with a very broad brand. Netflix is arguably for everyone.
Yeah.
but how do you enable, or how do you afford everyone to be at the front of the line and not just in line, during their month in Netflix games experiences?
I think it's, similar to what Jill said. I think the really important part is that we see ourselves, entertainment and games as a part of that brings us joy in our life. And it's something that we can emotionally resonate with. But we can only emotionally resonate with it if the characters and the world and the stories are something that we actually see ourselves in, and that we can say, oh, yeah, that's an experience I've had, or that's how I felt in my life. And this piece of entertainment is really speaking to the experiences that I have in my life. And so we have to do that, though, in a very authentic way. We can't, to your point, Gordon, just be like, this is the flavor of the month or whatever it might be. It has to be extremely authentic. And so that the way that we do that is by making sure that the people creating those games also understand that culture, that perspective, where those authenticity ideas come from. And so having that diversity in the team and those different perspectives is really important. If you're going to tell a story about women or a story about the Black culture and community, then you absolutely need those folks on the team sharing their authentic experiences, so that when those people play those games, they feel like it's speaking to them and it's not just lip service, or it's not just doing it for the sake of like filling some random quota. So yeah.
No, I was going to ask just a quick follow-up to that, because it's great. It's just great here. I'm a Netflix person. I watch Netflix. Okay, there's a lot of content on Netflix, and so I imagine a very critical part of your curation is what to greenlight, to make interactive, to take the next level. And I want to just sort of dive in there, because you're the boss, right? What is that like to bring those values to the fore when you're in the room where it happens about what is even going to be a Netflix game?
I mean, it's all a balance, isn't it? We don't want to tell all of the same stories all the time or build all of the same experiences all the time. So we look at the portfolio and we see how it's distributed. We look at the portfolio through many different attributes, culture, authenticity, diversity, variety, many different lenses that we look at the portfolio through. And we need to make sure that we're not over-indexing in one area or under-indexing in another. And so that balance is very fine line. It's crafted, it's thoughtful, like the strategy around that has to be really intentional. And so we think about that a lot, not only with the games that we want to build, but also with the developers that we work with, because we need to make sure that the makeup of the teams that we work with are also diverse and are also moving the needle on elements of that strategy that we feel like potentially we're under investing in right now. So it is definitely a very strategic, crafted, like thoughtful process that we have to go through to make sure that everybody's voice is heard and we are representing many different stories from around the world. And that's very important.
Which brings me to Renee, who has a rich history in our craft, leading the globe and leading a diverse, not only just leading diverse, but valuing a diverse group of developers.
Absolutely.
And bringing that into AAA development, which maybe historically wasn't grounded in all those same values. But here you are making what I'll call a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup at Phoenix Labs. So maybe talk about that. Talk about, how you make those values valuable in a AAA setting.
Yeah, certainly. So one of the papers that the IGDA published that I assisted with was called Inclusive Game Design Development. And like the other panelists have said, really being proactive about thinking about how to include more diverse perspectives, how to create more diverse content is super important. And at Phoenix Labs, that's something that we absolutely try to do. We try to be very proactive about our considerations for making a truly inclusive audience, because Phoenix Labs is to a large extent trying to help influence gamers across the entire world and bring them together across multiple platforms, across multiple cultures, because we see games as that shared element, the shared element of fun, of experiences that can bring people together and help people relate. And it's hard to bring people together if You don't allow them to express themselves. You don't allow them to relate to the characters and content you have. So unfortunately, most of our titles are unannounced, but we have Dauntless, which is our MMO that is out. And you can just see the different cultural influences across the costume styles, across the different ways to customize your character by, skin, by, other attributes as well. And I think that what developers need to realize is the more proactive you are, the more you start thinking about diversity and inclusion early in the game development process. When you think about accessibility as you're first designing your UI and those interactions, you're going to have a more accessible game. And it's the exact same as you're starting to consider building your worlds. You need to reach out and start talking with people who have experiences in different cultures and find how to respectfully bring those elements into the worlds of your own.
That's so cool. Now, Jessica, you mentioned you're serving a specific demographic.
Yeah.
Right? And so
in terms of age, yeah.
In terms of age, right?
Yeah.
But I guess what we've been talking about a little bit is almost more of a psychographic, right? And maybe talk about how you, deal with that intersection, because in your demographic, there's a wide range of feelings,
Sure.
perspectives, right? Of
Yeah.
people, they feel how they feel, and of a certain age, they feel how they feel, right? And so how do you infuse belonging, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in many of the same ways that that everyone has touched on so far, for us, the most kind of public way that I think we signal to our audience what we stand for and what our community stands for is through our avatars. So when you join Arcadium.com or one of our mobile games and you get to select an avatar to represent you, our default avatars run the gamut. So you can see all colors, all ages, all sizes, bald, not bald, gray hair, glasses, no glasses. So very different than what I typically think of as kind of representations of players in games traditionally. And that's something that we were very cognizant of in designing our avatars, and something that we're very proud of. And we think it's like truly a representation very quickly when you're joining this community of the types of people that represent the community and that you're going to be interacting with. So I would say, like, kind of from a visual standpoint, that's the first thing that we do to signal that. And then I think, similar to what Jill was saying, we have a page that lays out what we stand for as an organization and the principles of our community and the principles that our community was founded on. And so we kind of make no bones about saying right up front, we have zero tolerance for hate speech and trolls. We do not create games that are violent or pornographic, that degrade women. And then I think lastly is, we are very aware and dedicated to making as many of our games fully accessible as possible. And that is a big thing to chew for a games company that has, over 300 games, which is what, is in our library right now. So making those backwards compatible to be accessible, making sure our website is fully accessible are things that are major focuses for us as an organization, so that we can serve, everybody that wants to play games on our site.
That's so fantastic. And you have like a rich history around 20 years, right? Could you maybe talk about some of the points of inflection, like along the way, like where you said, oh, okay, this is a new phase of Arcadium. This is the sort of type of inclusion we're going to focus on.
Yeah. I think it's an ever evolving thing. I think it's certainly, as the co-founder of the company, as somebody who's been in, a leadership position at the organization for 20 years, I'm very, very happy to say that when I read about, unfortunately, some of the problems that, have been a little bit more public in our industry, they're very foreign to us at Arcadium. And I think part of that has to do with what Jill said, is that from the founding of the organization, we always had a very diverse group of people in leadership positions inside the organization. So I think as you were mentioning before, sometimes, media is a reflection of kind of the room where it happened. And if you're not getting a diversity of people and opinions and thoughts in that room, that can be reflective either in your algorithm or in your form of media or whatever it may be. So I think we've been lucky in that way, just because of the way the company was founded. But there have been moments along the way. I think we'll get into it when we talk about a little bit more, maybe about how we foster these feelings inside our organizations and things I've noticed that when we've done that. But yeah, I mean, everything from users reaching out to us and saying, hey, I'd like to see an avatar that's a little bit larger than maybe the ones you have, or I'm going through treatments for chemotherapy and I don't have any hair. I'd love to see an avatar that doesn't have any hair. So I think it's just those moments the more you're interacting with your audience and the more you're being open with them and allowing them to be open with you, and then doing something about it. It's just kind of step by step by step.
No, that's awesome. No, that's great. And it's great that for 2 decades, you've been in the room where it happens, hearing the conversation. Right? That's really what it is. It's like a conversation versus a complaint, right? Or lament, right? When you have executives on the other side who are listening and turning thoughts into action. I do want to go exactly where you just said, which is about inside the worlds that you're building as senior executives, inside the worlds of employees, of team members. And I guess it's super clear, right? If we leave the world to act on us, the world's doing terrible things left and right. However, in your worlds, you are empowered to try to, as best you can, create the most positive, cultivating environment you can for people to thrive. And I think it'd be really valuable to this audience. Some people, maybe different parts of their career, maybe on their way to be like you in their organizations, to hear some of the best practices that senior executives, you, are putting in place to retain and to cultivate underrepresented team members. And then whatever axes, feel right, because I think they all matter. But I'd love for you to give some sort of some specificity, some real takeaway that these people in the audience are like, oh, you know what? I should do some of that to cultivate and enrich people. And I'll start with you, Jessica, because 20 years, you got best practices.
Got a lot of processes.
Yes.
So I would say at the core of everything that we try to do, and if you do this right, I think everything gets a lot easier, is creating psychological safety in the workplace. So if people feel that they can be safe expressing themselves, being who they are, failing, being supported, being mentored, sharing their criticisms, sharing their opinions, then everything gets a lot easier after that. You have to set a foundation of deep psychological safety in your organization. Organizations have real problems when people feel like, something's happened, I'm being marginalized and I can't speak up about it. So I would say that's at the foundation of everything that we try to do and that I think needs to be done. And then, from a very specific kind of tips and practices point of view, I would say for us, a lot of our practices are based around trying to remove as much bias in the hiring and employee development process as possible. So, just in terms of complete and total transparency with everybody about what our salary bands are, about what it takes to be promoted. Specifically, we have multiple checks in with managers, with direct reports. I personally speak to all of my direct reports, and their direct reports. So I've got to kind of align all the way down the company. We've got about 110 people. So many mechanisms for getting feedback, both face-to-face and anonymously, is really important to us. And then, as I mentioned, kind of in the actual mechanics of hiring people and of supporting people in their professional development with us, just trying to remove as much potential unconscious biases as possible.
Right on. Wow. I'm going to go to Leanne. So, because we rushed through your bio, but Leanne, facts, you kind of done it all. Okay. You've done the most. These are just facts. And so I would just love that, because you've had a chance to engage with so many important points in our game history in different, I want to know, yeah, what now? You know, you go, oh, these are my best practices. This is what I'm cultivating now.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the, obviously what Jessica mentioned about psychological safety is absolutely spot on, but also from a strategic perspective, I feel like sometimes when we're trying to do something new and better and being more inclusive, we tend to create a strategy specifically for that thing. And then in turn, it means that thing then becomes isolated and separate. So one of the things that I've learned over time is that D&I, accessibility, inclusion, diversity, us being able to be inclusive and think about all the different types of players we have has to be ingrained in our core strategy. So, you know, it's very easy to have like this D&I strategy over on the side and try and feed it into the overall strategy. But, you know, at Raya, at Netflix, I always think about my strategy holistically and making sure that diversity and variety and inclusion, accessibility is 100% part of that. It's not just one KPI off to the side. It's actually ingrained and inbuilt and designed as a full part of that strategy. Because then every day when you are trying to execute on this strategy and the team have this vision and mission and goals in mind, it's one in the same thing. And so we are constantly striving for that balance. So I think as a best practice, that's something that I would always urge people to do is have it integrally as part of your strategy. And think about it, you know, especially when running a portfolio of games, like I mentioned before, it's a balance. You need to constantly be looking at that portfolio and seeing where there might be gaps, where there might be opportunities, and doing those regular portfolio reviews to really check on our biases and make sure we're not making all of the same game, because we can naturally fall into our own biases. So I think that's very important. And then obviously having different perspectives on the team, you know, and making sure that the people with those different perspectives can be unique, can bring their authentic self to work, can bring their personality to work and feel good about sharing those experiences. I think that's really important. And then one other thing I would say is I work with a lot of developers from indie, very small to large scale, and not all of the developers in our industry are able to gain the resources and research and data and useful insights to make diversity, inclusion, and accessibility part of their everyday. Because it does take a lot of research, it does take a lot of investment. And so I think as the publisher of those games, it's my job to make sure that all of our developers have access to that research, they have access to that data, the best practices of design. And so at Netflix, we run workshops for all of our developers and we run them through what accessibility means, what some good best practices are, how to think about design in an inclusive way. And so I think providing those resources to developers that may not have them otherwise is also a really important way for us to spread all of this very useful information and perspective.
No, that's fantastic. That's super cool. Jill, you have experience outside the game industry. You come from a broader world. You come from Canada. We expect kindness at every turn.
Big old Canada.
Yeah. But maybe talk about how your experiences both from outside of games, right? Red Bull and beyond, but also inside a women-led organization. Okay, where power is default, right?
Yeah.
So maybe talk about both of those things and how you're bringing best practices in those settings, right, to cultivate people.
Yeah, it's interesting. Jessica touched on a lot of like what we kind of have set up already. Like right from the hiring, I think it is important to bring in DEI experts to make sure that you are casting your net as wide as possible. I think growing up in a career, I came up in like sports marketing, action sports marketing. There was a lot of like me hiring that was happening, which is very easy to do. You're out there, those are kind of the circles you run in. So really to make sure that you push yourself outside of your circles is very important. And then with a women-led company and hiring women, I also come from a space of a lot of men were hired in the space is on the salary bands. It was really eye-opening to see out of almost everyone I have brought onto the team, whether full-time or contracting, most of them came to the table with less money than was in their band. It was except for one person. It was really crazy. So with all of them, we did thorough studies of where they should be and put them with wages that were higher than they even anticipated, which I was used to the other, where, you know, you kind of had to bring people back down. So I think that's something I'm hopeful that as women see women in senior leadership positions, like everybody on this panel, that in 5-10 years that won't be the case. You'll see women in boardrooms, you will see women as CEOs and in these positions. So younger women are like, hey, this is what I'm worth. Yeah, so that was the biggest like learning. And I think as we grow at Padia, we do have a very strong set mission and vision, and the team works at Padia because they believe so strongly in creating a brighter future in gaming. So making sure that myself as the CEO and as a company are always accountable to that. I am a cisgender white woman, so I don't know and understand where everybody else is coming from within the different verticals that are working on the team and trying to bring this forward. So constantly getting feedback on, are we still aligned with this, and making sure we're not making decisions based on economics. You know, we're making the right decision for what we're aligned with, and then bringing in their insight to keep us on that track and vision. I know one thing I say that I cannot get out of my language is guys. I always say, hi guys, how's it going? I lead a team of women, and I just hosted a panel for women evolving in the gaming, and I must have said it like 30 times. I was like, stop it. So I have so much learning and growing to do as well. But I love that my team can help teach me that.
We all do it. And Renee, I'm gonna get to you in a second, but I want to just sit in this for a second, because the existence of gendered pay bands is one, awful, okay, period. But two, like, how do we cultivate this? Okay, so we know it is happening. You've observed it. Everyone came together, and you're not saying like a couple people. You're like, oh no, it was being experienced by my entire workforce, right?
Yeah.
How do we, like, y'all are all C-levels, okay? How do we bring everyone to that sort of perspective? Like, hey, this is an unacceptable practice as many of the other terrible practices, okay, which are going on, and being like, hey, you know what would be a great place to start with equity? How about day zero when you walk in the door? Like, you know, how does that discourse even begin to take place? Where inside the worlds we control, inside just games, we can't fix the world, right? But inside games, where we go like, hey, everybody's gonna get paid the same, and we're gonna talk about it until we're done talking about it. Because that seems like so fundamental, like even before anything, like the comfort level to pay people differently based on their gender is the beginning of a terrible biased work experience. Because if you're comfortable doing that systemically, right? Well, that's a symptom, right, of how you're comfortable treating people every day, because it's starting off with their economic benefit for doing the work. Like, what is I don't know, maybe you've seen in other fields, I don't know where this has been addressed. I don't know if there is a field where like, oh, there's no gender inequity in, I don't know. I don't even want to guess, but something, right? Are there things that you've seen as C-levels where you'd be like, oh, we want to model the behavior of these other industries or companies in order to bring that same value? Like, you had to make a choice. Like, you would be like, oh, these people are all be underpaid. That's not going to be how it's going to be, right? So at some level, you had to either come up with it yourself in your heart or be modeling a behavior, right? Like, I want to ask all of you, like, and I get to you, I'm not skipping you, but it's so important. Like, who do y'all model after to make things better as C-level executives where you can drive change?
I think it's important to look in all areas to find inspiration to pull from in order to create systems and processes and values and policies that are going to best support everyone. I don't think that there's a single source of truth. As you said, there's no industry doing it perfectly. So I think that that's the importance of having panels like this and having conversations like this, so we can all share our best practices, our knowledge, and then take those back and implement them to best support our employees.
Yeah, I'll pose it differently. Like a lot of the work of DEI and B seems like it's reparative. Okay, like it's reparative work versus cultivating, sustaining work, which is a different vibe. That's that, like what Jill was talking about was so visceral because it wasn't diversity, inclusion, belonging. It was paying people what they deserve to start. And then like letting them go to work and, be good at the jobs, get evaluated. If they work for Jessica, they're going to get spoken to individually, like, right? But it begins with day zero that we've made you an equitable offer so that you can have a good experience with your bosses. And I can't help but wonder,
this may be too specific, Gordon, but one of the things we did starting, I want to say 12 years ago, is it's now law in New York State at least, but we made it part of our hiring manager kind of requirements that you're not permitted to ask someone what they were making in their current position. And the reason we did that is because oftentimes, people who are women or people of color are naturally making, unfortunately, 10 to 15%, maybe less than what other people in those positions are making. So when you start by benchmarking somebody in their current position, and then you kind of make the mental calculation as a C-level person or as a hiring manager, oh, well, they're making 65,000, I can offer them 67 and they'll be happy. Whereas if you know that the pay band for this role in this region is 90, then you don't even start with the question. And luckily, in many states now, that question is actually illegal to ask. So I think that that's been a good way that we've progressed.
Right. And that's sort of what I mean about systems. If you set up a system for compensation based on person's experience or, their current skill set, then you're going to ensure that people are being paid equitably. Because like at Phoenix Labs, we have leveling competencies and there are different bands, and all of those bands have set pay scales based on the role within the market. And everyone has this very easy way to see where they should be placed, and managers have this to refer to, and it specifically tells you, okay, if you are at this skill level in this discipline, then this is the compensation that you will receive, and it's very straightforward. And there's not really much room for bias in the system, right? The system was intended to be equitable, and we heard about that system from a different company. I imagine I wasn't there when we created it. And it's about sharing those types of practices that I think gives us tangible efforts to take forward.
That also really helps when people are in chair, right? Because then you're avoiding the like me issues that come up with promotions and advancement. It's like, I like this person. We hang out and go to the bar together. So, when it comes time to give raises, maybe I'm going to give this person a little bit more. And when you have those very transparent systems in place, then it becomes nearly impossible for you to do things like that.
Right on. Okay, good. This is so great. I talk every week. But I want to ask you, and I want to afford, sometimes people have questions in the crowd. This is interactive, folks. If you want to ask, this is a fantastic, rare opportunity to have these intelligent voices all together. What practices for yourselves as individuals? So you've taken different paths, but they've all led to leadership and to like living your values. And I think it might be helpful to share, to inspire, frankly, people who are watching, if you don't mind sharing some of your own, a practice of yours that has helped you navigate forward authentically. And I'll start with Leanne.
Yeah, I think, it's early in my career, especially in video games. When I very first started, I was the only woman in the whole studio, right? Let alone the only woman in the room. So I think sometimes it felt like I couldn't speak up because my opinion was so very different to the rest of the people in the room. But over time, I realized that's actually my superpower, right? And so I think that would be the advice I would give anyone that's in an underrepresented group, or even just has a different belief or values or systems or whatever that thing might be, a culture, the way they've brought up, whatever that uniqueness is that makes you different, that is literally your superpower. So bring that into the conversation. Don't be afraid to speak that perspective and potentially check other assumptions in the room. You know, I think that's when you've got 5 of the same type of person in the room, you're generally going to get the same answer. And so we have to challenge our own assumptions and our own biases. And I would just, you know, say to people, don't be afraid to do that, you know, because that different in perspective could actually result in better creativity, better product, better experience. And so it's always worth sharing that opinion and not being worried about what the impact might be. And then also from my perspective, you know, I want to show that there is a career for women in games, you know, and so for me it's being able to show other women that you can be a leader in games and that this can be a viable career, and being able to provide that mentorship to women coming in their career right now, which I didn't have when I was coming into my career. So I feel like that for me is really important to give back and try and actually grow and evolve that part of our business. So.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I'm going to go to Renee. It's just great. I'm just soak and smoke because this panel we have abundance, not scarcity, an abundance of voices. I'm so in. Renee, same question.
Yeah, I think that the tool that I have used for myself personally has been self-reflection. I think it is so easy for us to pick up biases throughout our lives and our experiences, and to not always act in a way that's inclusive and equitable. And I think it really takes a lot of self-reflection to overcome that, to look at the choices that you're making, the way that you're interacting with people, and to really, really analyze internally if you're doing so in a way that is fair to everyone. And certainly I've had learnings over time. I can't say when I started out as a mechanical engineer, I was the most empathetic person. And now, you know, empathy is something that I really try to cultivate because I understand how important it is to connect with others and to be able to understand their perspectives from their shoes. So yeah, I would say that like the empathy and self-reflection are 2 tools that I use greatly personally. And when it comes to the business side of things, I wrote a whole paper on it. So if you look up Guide for Game Companies, how to create and sustain a positive work culture, it has everything in there when it comes to the business side of things, everything from diverse hiring to exit interviews.
Awesome. Jill, same question.
Lots of learnings, but I think the biggest one as the takeaway is team. I, being an entrepreneur, liking to create new things and take risks, sometimes I've had the habit of doing more myself, but what I learned as I got older, build that team around you. You cannot do everything yourself, and you should not. So really understand your strengths and then what you need to surround yourself with. Because when you have a dynamite team, like, business is magic and you can do whatever you want. So that would be my number 1 takeaway, is build your team to be the best that they can be.
That makes sense. And now, Jessica, 20 years. So there's no better way.
Jessica, 20 years.
There's no way. There's no better way. I'll
just distill it down to 2 personal best practices. I would say one is very similar to what Renee said. So for me, I assume positive intent. And I think that's another way to say show empathy. I think that we live right now, we're going through a time where people have been through a lot, people continue to go through a lot of conversations have a lot of undertones and are very fraught with stuff. And so I always try my best myself, and then it's kind of a team practice to assume positive intent in someone's messages, in their words and what they said. But to balance that, I would say also be very clear about your boundaries, know what they are, and stick up for them. So 2 specific examples I'll give. early on at Arcadium, we were working in Eastern Europe, and we had a woman who was running, who was about to be promoted to run our QA team, and she was from a different religion than was practiced in the country, and she was a woman, and the team was all men. And the men, even though I was the head of the company at the time, the men took me aside and said, if you promote her to the head of QA, nobody's going to listen to her because she's from this ethnic minority. She practices this different religion, and she's a woman. And I had a big choice to make because I had a large team of people, and I thought, am I going to be, if I do this, am I going to be now discounting their culture? This is the culture that they live with. This is how they, what they bring to the table. And ultimately, we made the decision to promote her and put her in the position. She went on to be on our management team.
Yeah, she
and
did. Of course she did.
And the people who put up the stink, they learned very quickly, I think, that that maybe they needed to rethink about, some of the biases that they were bringing to the table. So I would say that's definitely, a boundary that, I didn't want to see crossed. And then another one is just for me personally, lucky enough to have started my own company. So I don't see a lot of gender bias inside Arcadium, but was working with an outside investor who at one point decided to comment on how I looked instead of commenting on how the company was performing. And so we decided to not have them be involved in the organization anymore. So I think, just understanding, giving people the benefit of the doubt, but understanding when somebody crosses a specific line, that it's your job to stand up for what you believe in, because people notice.
Yeah, they do. So okay, see, exactly. All of that, people at home. Why it's so important. Oh my God, representation and excellence matter. And y'all are doing it. So thank you for your time today. For people who want to follow up with you, to the degree you're comfortable, do you mind sharing your LinkedIn's, or is there a way people can keep this conversation going? Because I think hopefully people are seeing that engaging with you would be smart. Right. And so if you don't mind, just put it in the chat. Or I guess they'll make it available afterwards too, possibly. But thank you everyone who came to attend today out in the crowd. Obviously, Jessica, Jill, Renee, Leanne, thank you for your time. Tinzar, Ned, thank you for bringing us together for this important discussion, which I guess will be available recorded, right, to attendees.
It's recorded indeed, and can be shared and reposted and whatever you want to do with it. So
okay,
we will send it out to everybody. And again, thank you, Gordon. Thanks, Jessica, Jill, Leanne, Renee. Fantastic panel. We really enjoyed it today. All right, everybody, have a good. One last thing is one last session today. Josh Ugato will be doing a keynote conversation with David Bloom at the top of the hour in 10 minutes, and that'll conclude our day one. So please join us in 10 minutes. All right.